got no rules, I count 'em.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another Live with Dr. Dawn. I'm your host, Dr. Dawn 𝗪𝗲 double board certified child lesson and adult psychiatrist. I'm a two-time best-selling author, podcaster, public speaker, producer, and media influencer, the sole practitioner of ADHD Wellness Center in Houston, Texas, with a virtual presence. And I'm also licensed in 5 other states, and I will be sharing a lot of that information with you soon. But tonight, I want you to share this, you all. If you are loyalists of Dr. Dawn, the Live with Dr. Dawn show, please, you already know what I'm going to ask. Share this with at least 2 people that you know, because tonight I have one of my dearest alumni on tonight, Xavier University, Louisiana. I am truly honored to have her on this show. I mean, like, very excited. I heard about Allissa at school, and she reminded me that she was a part of the inaugural class of 40 Under 40, which I also had the honor of being part of the 3rd class. And she's a part of the inaugural class. I mean, Allissa is amazing. And if you don't have her book, you better go get her book right now. Listen, Bearing Witness While Black, African-American Smartphones and the New Protest, #journalism by Allissa Richardson. She's award-winning. She's an educator, a professor. I mean, just a movement in herself. And I cannot wait to you all, if you have not heard her speak. If you haven't read her book, you're in a wonderful treat tonight, because tonight I'm going to bring her to you all, and we're going to really talk about the current events that are happening. We're going to talk about her book. We're going to talk about mental health. We're going to talk about a lot of things tonight. So go ahead and share this. Go ahead and put your comments. You already know, put your comments. Let me know that you're here. Hi, Elnora. Thanks for joining. Appreciate you. I see some of you all are coming into the room. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Allissa Richardson.
Hi, Dr. Dawn.
Hello. How you doing this night? Good to see you.
I'm doing great. I am so proud of you. I'm just so honored to be on your show. I mean, this is so on brand for you. You've been phenomenal since we were at Xavier. So to be on this program with you and just share this space is amazing. You're doing some phenomenal things in the space of mental health.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Richardson. And I have to say the same about you. I am truly honored and thrilled. I've been excited since you said yes, since we had our conversation a couple of weeks ago. I was like, I have to call. Yes. Just who you are is just amazing. And you were very inspiring when I read about you under 40, because I know we didn't really cross paths at Xavier, but everyone I crossed paths with, whether it's during my time at Xavier or after, I mean, just amazing people. I know we both, probably, I'll speak for ourselves, both of us, we feel honored to attend the HBCU that actually continues after our experience there. And I've met so many people after that just, poured into, my life and just getting to know what they're doing and supporting them. So again, thank you so much for being on the show. Truly grateful. Yes. So Allissa, where are you from? We're just going to start with, where are you from? I just want to know, a little bit about your upbringing and what led you to choose Xavier as your school of choice.
Yes, I'm from the DMV, as we call it. So I was born in DC, but grew up in Maryland and spent a lot of my time just on the campuses of colleges. My mom is an educator, and she always had me on her alma mater, on Howard University's campus, or on the flagship University of Maryland's campus. She was always doing adjunct professoring and teaching, and I just thought this is a really cool job to have. So after I went to Xavier, I tried to figure out what are some ways I can still stay in higher ed, because I just had such a really great time in college and didn't really want to leave. And that's not an option. Both of my parents are first generation college students, and they were like, you will leave and you're going to do something else in addition too. So it was kind of this secret plot to figure out how to get back to teaching or being in that space after I graduated. So after leaving Xavier, I went to graduate school at Northwestern, journalism school in Chicago, and then earned my PhD back at home at the University of Maryland. And during that 10-year span, it was really an incredible journey from working with Mr. Johnson for Jet and Ebony magazines to freelancing for Oprah magazines, and then just coming back and wanting to give back, not seeing many people outside of those ethnic publication spaces who look like me. And I said, where are all the young Black writers? You know, what's going on here? And so when I would ask other editors, they would say, well, we just can't find them. We don't know where they are. The pipeline is small, so on and so forth. So I said, well, maybe I'll start teaching. And I had a friend who was leaving Morgan State University in Baltimore. She said, do you want to take my spot? And I said, well, I've never taught college. I don't know what it is, but you know, it sounds really interesting. If you'll show me some of your syllabi and how you put things together, I'm willing to try. In the first year, I just fell in love with it and did not leave and got to fulfill that wish of going back to HBCU.
Wow. Can I ask, because I always get this question a lot, like why did I choose Xavier? Why did you choose Xavier?
I chose Xavier because they were relentless in that marketing, Dr. Dawn. I know you got the letters that were like, we are #1 in getting African Americans into medical school. It was like a little yellow piece of paper or a green piece of paper that would come in the mail like every other day. And I was like, what is Xavier? What is going on down here? Because I was interested at first in pre-med. And my mom said, well, let's give it a chance. And I thought, that's really far. I kind of initially had my heart set on either Howard, where my parents went, or University of Maryland. But as I began to learn more about New Orleans, and as you know, that was just a really hype area at the time. I mean, Master P had the #1 song, that spring break. Everybody would make them say, I was like, oh, this is what New Orleans is about. Maybe I'll go down here. So it really became this journey to want to spread out, because my dad is very protective. And he was like, oh, if you go to Howard, I'll be up there every weekend and I'll come visit. And I said, oh, what? I'm not going to want you to be up there every weekend there. So he was devastated when I told him I was going that far away. But I knew that there were several students who went to my high school who were headed that way. And I said, well, at least I won't be by myself. I'll know somebody. And it ended up being the best decision to go that far away.
And that's why I want to know, in hindsight, you know, do you feel that Xavier University of Louisiana prepared you for what you're doing now?
Oh, yes. And I think, you know what, Dr. Dawn, I think one of the things they instilled within us is the desire to be a servant leader. And even from that little white house where you go and try to figure out who you're going to volunteer for and what group you're going to be mentoring, like, it wasn't cool to not have some kind of community service as part of your profile. Everyone was like, so who are you reading to today? What school are you visiting? You know, where are you cleaning up? Or what are you painting? And that was aside from any Greek obligations that you may have had through Panhill. So I think for me, Xavier really instilled within me a desire to want to serve and want to see who's the most vulnerable of us and how can I use what God has gifted me to try to help. And that's really what the advantage of going to that school is always keeping in mind people who may need you, who may never have an opportunity to step into a privileged space like a college, you know, because Xavier is located in an area that has been disinvested in for a very long time. And as you walk through the campus, you're walking through neighborhoods that care for God. And it's just very inspiring. It was inspiring for me, at least, to see people happy to see us going to school and waving to us, from a lady who had the ices in front of her house.
On the way to Xavier South, that's right.
Yes, on the way to Xavier South. I mean, it was just so many supportive people who seemed excited that we were trying to make something of ourselves. So I think no matter what industry you wanted to be in, Xavier was an excellent place to learn. When I decided my senior year, for example, to leave biology pre-med. Now I took the MCAT, I got into Howard just to kind of appease my dad.
I want people to know all this. That's why I'm focused, right? You senior year, you made a change, right?
Senior year. And I said, let me do this because my dad is going to be hot, okay? Because he's from the Caribbean. You have two options. You'll be a doctor, a lawyer, maybe an engineer. So when you tell him I'm going to be a journalist, he was like, what? You're going to be getting in people's business for a living? No one likes journalists. So he was right about that. But I mean, the thing that really did it for me is that I was able to show Dad, I have 2 acceptance letters. I have one to Howard Med School and one to Northwestern for their journalism school. And I'm going to pick this one. This isn't like a fallback because I didn't get in. I wanted you to know you did prepare me. You didn't waste your money. And this is what we're going to do. I'm going to be a health journalist. And he was just like, okay. Like he had a really hard time with it. My mom was happy though. She was like, you always love to write. Thank goodness that you're doing something for you. So it was it was a tough decision, but
yeah. What happened in the senior year that kind of projected you to make that decision or propelled you to do that?
Yeah, Dr. Francis picked me junior year to write a big spread about St. Catherine Drexel becoming canonized. And she was getting that title, Saint. And he said, I need somebody on the Xavier Herald who can write a piece about that journey and what it entails. And I thought, wow, this is a big story. It's a big deal. He's going to the Vatican. Like, this is huge. I couldn't get it wrong. And I really started having fun going to his office and interviewing him, getting to know his administrative assistant, Kate Watkins. And during that time of being in the president's office, kind of touching the hem of his garment, I was like, this is really neat. Journalists get to go everywhere that people don't normally get to go. So I was kind of sneaking and doing it, not telling my parents about it. I was like, yeah, I'm taking the MCAT. I'm doing my Princeton classes. I'm studying for the MCAT. And they're like, okay, we're not hearing from you as much. And it was because I had started really doing a lot of work with the Xavier Herald and just trying to see what stories and I could do and how far it would take me. So after that St. Catherine Drexel story, Dr. Francis told me that was one of the best stories I've ever read in the Herald. And I was like, what? Because he's been president for a long time. And then he said, what are your plans after school? And I told him, I'm conflicted. And I just confided. I told him that I was trying to decide what I wanted to do and I didn't want to disappoint anybody. And, one of the things he said is, when you're ready to apply, I will write your recommendation. And he did. To his credit, he wrote me a recommendation to get into Northwestern. And everybody was like, you got a letter from Dr. Francis? Like when I had my interview, they all know him. He's world renowned. So they were just like, we just wanted to hear how you pulled that off. And I said, well, I've been in his office for the last couple of months, getting to know him and getting to prepare for this historic piece. So from there, I was kind of like, okay, if Dr. Francis said I could do it, and he thinks that I should, and he's like pushing me to go with my heart, then, I will. I mean, because his name is on the science building. He could easily say, do science. Don't mess up our stats. Because J.W. Carmichael, and they were about those stats. They were like, wait a minute. Right. You came in and I didn't accept it somewhere. So
okay, exactly.
That
you
was
mentioned
part of
the letters you received for the marketing. I mean, front and back, multi-paragraphs. Yes. And you're. I mean, I share the same sentiments about Dr. Francis. There's not one thing that I cannot say about him. I mean, just a phenomenal, just a person, just and genuine, gentle nature, just a caring man. But I want to focus on you. I mean, how did you feel when you were chosen to write this story? How did that make you feel?
I was really excited because I was new to the paper, and here I am, a biology major at that. And I'd written a few stories prior to, but when the editor-in-chief and our faculty advisor picked me, I was scared at first. I thought, oh no, they really trust me to do this. I really got to see it through. But I was also a little bit anxious because I knew that it was a shift, and I knew that it was probably the beginning of the end, because for me, there was no greater rush than seeing that byline and be like, wow, all these months of work really culminated to create something that somebody will get some new information out of, or, see somebody in a different light from. So for me, leaving medicine was pretty easy, especially after Dawn. I did a volunteer program too with the Children's Hospital there. And my specialty was going to be neonatology. So that's tough. It's preemies. So my job in that hospital was to kind of put my hands in those little gloves and keep the babies warm. It's called a hugger. So I was a hugger. And I think the shift for me was one day I went in and I was assigned my little baby Colin, and I was like looking for Colin. He was not there. And I was like, where is he? And I'm like looking in all the different little beds that they have, thinking they moved him, and he passed away. So Dr. Dawn, I was just devastated. I was like, well, where is he? I didn't get a chance to say goodbye, all those kinds of things. And the nurses, they were sympathetic, but their response was so perfunctory, like they were used to. death, and they were used to preemies, and they were just kind of like, you know, you're gonna have to toughen up if this is what you want to do. And I was very upset by that. I was kind of like, I don't know if I ever want to be in a position where I'm have to be numb to a child dying because that's what the job requires. And I was thinking there's got to be some other way that I can be helpful to youth, but not see them at their worst, or even have to bury them. So that's a very tough thing that I had to deal with. And I had to really figure out, okay, maybe is it another specialty I can do? Maybe it's pediatrics. I don't know. Maybe I don't want to do preemies. And so there was that real wrestling between junior and senior year for me. That was, you know, really me finding out that my heart wasn't in it in the way that I thought it was.
And I commend you for your courage, Allissa, because you give hope to those who are college students and who are struggling with the same type of situation. They're wrestling back and forth between what they want to do. And, you know, for us that go into school, just, you know we want to do, we might have had some experience in some kind of way, whether that be, you know, following another person that's in the field or reading about it, or our parents, or, you know, doctors, for example. So we have the exposures, we hear the stories, you know, and then we find out we like it, great. But you give hope to those who are just still wrestling. And I always, you know, that I see, I always tell them it's okay, because this is a part of the natural experience to understand that. And if you are wrestling, that may be a good thing to let you know that, well, maybe I should consider something different. Maybe I should do some internships or volunteers opportunities to see if this is something I really enjoy. And so, you know, thank you for your courage in doing that, because who knows if we would have had this. So I definitely want to go transition forward. And with the students that you're working with now, can you tell me what your relationship has been like in working with students in the lab, in the Mojo lab?
Yes, yeah, Mojo Lab started. The Mojo Lab is the Mobile Journalism Lab, and it's something that I started 10 years ago on the campus of Morgan State University, my very first job. And students there were really nervous. They were just scared to go outside and report, Dr. Dawn. They were just like, the community around the school, much like Xavier, had been so disinvested in, that there were very little opportunities for jobs, lots of crime. And my students were often accosted or, you know, and many times robbed for their equipment. And so we couldn't have fancy, you know, cameras and things like that we would send them out with. And a lot of them were like, you know, how are we going to get the training that we need if we can't practice? And they were right about that. So in 2010, that was the first year that the iPhone had the front and rear facing camera on it. And I kind of played around with it, and I was like, oh, I can see myself. You know, that's like the year the selfie was born. But for me, it's also the year I realized, oh, I can do my own stand-up, you know, with a microphone, and I don't need a cameraman per se to film me. This could really open up, you know, a lot of opportunities for my students. So we started playing around with the cameras. I won a grant from the Knight Foundation, and they gave me some money to outfit the lab. So every student had their own iPod Touch. And we really just started churning out stuff, just seeing what looked the best, what sounded the best. Some was really good, some wasn't great, some was jiggly, but we were trying. We were trying to figure out what was going on. And that's when I got invitations to come to Africa. And it was an organization called Global Girl Media. And they were like, we're looking for a way to incorporate mobile, because the same thing is happening overseas in South Africa. Now that the World Cup is over, their cities being disinvested in, you know, the eyes of the world aren't on them. Crime is ticking up again. And we have this group of girls that wants to do journalism. The thing about that really touched my heart is they added on a piece. They said all 20 of the girls participating in the program self-identify as HIV positive. And, you know, the old, you know, Xavierite in me, the old pre-med was like, what? You know, my heart just swelled. Like, how old are they? And they said, nobody's older than 19. Many of these babies were born with this. And they want to just tell their stories in the time that they have. So I said, of course, you know, I'll sign on to do that. So I developed the curriculum for them. I stayed there for a month. And the library we were in was called the Rosa Parks Library. And we just really dug into creating journalism with these small devices that they had in their pocket that normally we wouldn't have been able to afford. You know, quite frankly, we couldn't give all 20 of the girls an expensive video camera. But with that iPod Touch, they were able to create some stuff. And My only regret is one of my favorite students from the program. I gave her an iPod. I just left it with her because I said, I know you are going to do amazing things, because she would be in the van on the way back to the library just editing, and she would be finished her story, Dr. Dawn, before those other kids even sat down to like debrief and take their jacket off. She would be like, I'm finished. Here you go, Miss Allissa. And I was like, how are you doing?
Right.
So I left my iPod with her, but unfortunately, you know, I got word maybe a couple months after I got back home that she passed away, that she died from tuberculosis. So I dedicated the book to her because I was just so hurt by, you know, what I thought I was running from. I was like, I ran from medicine because I thought I wouldn't have to deal with that difficult part of, you know, loving on kids, you know, the fact that some of them don't make it to adulthood. And I was thinking, here I find myself again, as someone I got really attached to and hope the best for, and they're not here. So I dedicated the book to her because I felt like we never would have heard her voice, Dr. Dawn, had it not been for that tiny device. And the fact that we were able to screen her films, World AIDS Day in New York, and her, you know, films were on the billboards in Times Square, was just amazing to me. And she'll, you know, be forever young. She was only 18 when she passed, but the technology just means so much to me. It's not just, you know, people thumbing it. It's kids really speaking up.
That's right. You know, it's interesting because you mentioned the Mojo Lab, like we have like thousands of them. When you actually had the very first Mojo Lab in the world, in the globally,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, that is amazing. And not only that, you've actually won multiple awards for your work in South Africa. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I got the call shortly after I've given birth to my first baby, my daughter, and maybe a week after she was born. And NABJ, the National Association of Black Journalists, called, and they said, we would like to award you Journalism Professor of the Year. And I was like, what? I've been a member of NABJ since I was at Xavier. So I was my senior year I joined. So I kind of just was stuck for a second. I remember they said, hello, hello. And I said, yes, you know, I'm here. But my second thought was, oh no, I'm not cleared to fly, because it was only in a few weeks. And the thing that I love so much about Xavier, Dr. Dawn, is Dr. Francis went to the ceremony and accepted the award on my behalf because I could not fly. I just had a C-section, couldn't go anywhere. And I called down to the school. I called Ms. Watkins, his administrative assistant. She said, yes, we will be there. And I said, thank you, because that's where the convention was that year. It was in New Orleans. So I said, I don't want to not be there. You know, they don't give but one of these every year. And you can only win it once. Like once you win, you can't win it ever again. And you're like in their Hall of Fame, you know, publications and stuff. So that's just another reason why I love Xavier so much, is that no matter what I decided to do, they were still there to support. So won that in 2012. And then in 2013, Apple came and they were like, you know, we have this distinguished educator program. And I was like, what's that? And they said, well, it's called an ADE, an Apple Distinguished Educator. And we basically will take you around the world and you tell other teachers what you do with the technology. And I was like, okay. So again, I love to travel. Again, they were like, just get on the flight. And they would basically, for about 2 to 3 years, it was a steady monthly kind of thing where they would find teachers who were wrestling with how to use mobile technology in their class. I would come give a little rah-rah talk and show them a couple tricks, and then I would go home. And so it was really neat because I got to meet so many professors from around the world. They have a global conference, as you know. And so I was in Germany, I was in Berlin speaking, and just all around the United States. And then the last thing was, after that, then Harvard called and they said, we have a fellowship that we want you to come to. And I'm thinking, what? So that was in 2014. And I said, okay, I'll apply to this because I didn't know much about it. And I applied and got in. And basically you come for a semester, you come to work on a project, or you basically come to pour into the students who are there. And that was surreal, being there, because even though they don't have a journalism school, they have a pretty strong student newspaper, and they go on to write for like Saturday Night Live and all that. So to kind of work with the next generation pulled me out of my comfort zone because I had been at HBCUs for so long. So to be in a space that was very wealthy and very white, quite frankly, I was just like, okay, I need to continually put myself in a position where I'm stretching beyond my comfort zone because it's good for me to do so. And it's good for the audience too, to see, Black woman who is doing, making advancements in tech, where that's usually a white man's domain. So to be in those spaces was incredible. And I think that's what really caught the ear of USC. So when they had this position open, someone called me around Christmas time and said, we have an open position for an assistant professor. When are you going to be done your PhD? And I was like, oh, I'll be done in the spring, God willing. So they were just like, okay, well, give us a call. Actually go ahead and put your stuff in the box. Go ahead and submit it and we'll hold it. So I didn't think anything of it, Dr. Dawn, because I was thinking this is USC, the number one journalism school in the world. Like we go back and forth with Stanford. But we're still number one now. Last year we slipped a little bit, but we're number one still.
Right.
And so they called and they said, go ahead and apply. And I did. And maybe a couple months later, I get a call from the director. And I didn't even think it was her. I didn't believe it because it sounded like such a newscastery voice. And she said, we would like to invite you to campus. And usually, Dr. Dawn, when it gets down to a campus visit, they have narrowed it down to 3 finalists out of hundreds. So I knew I really had to shine and just do my best. And the thing that I really want to tell that is nothing but God, I said, let me go and act like, this is an intake process. We're both Greek. And I said, let me make sure I know all the big brothers and sisters on this list because I don't know who I'm going to be meeting with. I need to know something about everybody, right? So I look on the list, Dr. Dawn, and who do I see? Dr. Allissa Richardson, who was my teacher at Xavier, and she was our advisor for NABJ. I was like, get out of here. I said, what is Xavier doing here?
Wow.
And I look and I emailed her and I said, do you really work here? I said, I thought you were in Chicago. She said, no, girl, I just got here. She said, I saw your application. You're going to do this. And I was just like, oh my goodness, she's here. This has to be a good sign. And she's been supporting me ever since. So Xavier is a strong force in the world.
Yes, it is. But, there's a centralized theme that you mentioned through that kind of journey of accepting all these awards and being afforded all these opportunities. They called you.
Yes.
And some of these things you weren't even aware of, right? But they called you. And I think that's a testament to the young people that are looking at this or who will see this on the replay, is that God will definitely open doors for you. He will definitely be with you every step of the way, even if the change happens at the end of your tenure. It can still happen. And how God has been with you throughout this journey is just simply God. It's the fullness of God. And when I hear your story over and over again in different parts that I didn't know before, I just get chilled because, we can express how God is. I mean, this is a testament to how he is. And I know your parents are proud. I know they're nothing but proud.
My dad took a while though. He did, Dr. Dawn. What did it for him is when I was at Jet Magazine, I had to do a story on Motown. It was like a Motown roundup. He loves Motown. So I got to do an interview with Smokey Robinson, and I took a picture with him and sent an autograph to my dad. And he was like, what is this? He was like, is this for? He's like trying to be all cool. He's like, what is this? And I was like, it's for you, Daddy. He was just like, so you got to talk to him? And I said, yeah, cool. And I'm just like, this guy here.
I love
after
it.
that, he was very supportive.
I know he was. Oh, wow. I really wanted to spend this time really getting to know you and for people to understand who you are. And then because I think that relates to what you've accomplished. And I think that a lot of times we're acknowledged for what we do. And sometimes, I think that can play a toll on us. We just want to be acknowledged for who we are. And so thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much for allowing me to, ask those questions and come into your personal space, because it makes a difference. And I think that's how people are seeing themselves in you and able to have that type of connection and say, wow, she's just like me. Okay, there's some struggles, I'm not sure. Oh, it is my last year, but I can still do this,
Right.
And this is how the doors open when you're truly walking in your destiny. The doors
Yes,
open wide. Yes. So this was initially a dissertation. Is that correct?
Yes, it was, Dr. Dawn. I thought I was going to go into the PhD program writing about the impact of mobile journalism on girls in Africa. And I was like, basically, I'm going to turn my Africa trip into an inward study. I'm going to go back and interview the young ladies who want to still talk to me about, what they got out of it. And that's going to be it. I thought it was going to just be kind of an in and out thing that would lead me to, quite frankly, being able to write more grants so I get back to them. It was kind of like this whole plot to figure out how can I raise some more money so I can go back over and do some more programs on a bigger scale. But that changed because the first day of school, the first week of school, Mike Brown was killed. And I thought, wow, I'm watching this young man in the street, uncovered, 4 hours. And just 4 months before his killing, I had given birth to a boy. And I thought, wow, is that really how little we matter? And I watched his mom just wailing in the street and they wouldn't let her pass that tape. And really, a lot of people forget that Ferguson began with mothers who were surrounding Leslie McSpadden at that time and refusing her, to grieve alone. And then as dads got off work, they joined. And then the militarized response that we know then descended upon them. So as I'm watching this whole thing play out, I'm thinking, wow, I will always have, a heart for what's going on abroad throughout the diaspora. There's an emergency right here at home with my immediate family, which is African Americans. And I thought there has to be somebody who's going to document what all of these citizen journalists are doing, because I'm not getting my news for the first time from legacy media like CNN or MSNBC. I was glued to Twitter. And as I talked to other Black people, I noticed they were doing the same thing. I'm like, oh, y'all on Twitter too? And you guys are on Instagram or trying to figure out different pieces from Facebook. Like there was such a search for an honest report from various social media networks that I didn't see before. And I thought this is a real tipping point. We are no longer trusting legacy media to give the official account because for so long, it's just parroted what the police said happened. And I said, this is really powerful because at the center of it all is this tiny device again. It's a smartphone, this device that I've known for now 4 years to be something that liberates Black voices. But now I'm looking at it being used as a tool for self-defense. For people saying, I won't let you make up a story about me. I know what happened. And so to me, that was very powerful. And that made me shift my whole course of study to want to dedicate my PhD program to really theorizing around, okay, what does mobile journalism mean to Black people? Because one of the things I noticed too, Dr. Dawn, is if we don't write things down, especially as Black women, it will be taken. I was watching a ton of people who didn't look like me say, I have a mojo lab. And they were busting out these labs and getting some money. And I was thinking, wait a minute now. And they weren't mentioning we're building off the work of Allissa Richardson, or we're building off the work of the Mojo Lab, or we're using their curriculum in many cases. They weren't saying any of that. And I was thinking 10 years from now, when we go to say, when did this shift occur? If I don't write anything down, it's like I was never here. It's going to be like I just did all this labor and maybe touched a few thousand students, but it won't be, in the books. So I said, I'm just going to write about this, not only for me, but to memorialize and give respect to those Black witnesses. Because for so long, when we dare to look at stuff, it's not even considered journalism. And so I said, no, I want to situate this in the media studies canon. I want all media scholars to look at this like it's journalism, because it is. They're doing the work of journalists, and they're looking into a space that we could never look into before, Dr. Dawn. If you think about these 3 overlapping eras of domestic terror against us, from slavery to lynching to police brutality, we can only look in one of those phases. Slavery, you could not look. You had to look away, lest you incur the wrath of master yourself. Lynching. We look at lynching photographs. There's no Black people in the fringes of lynching photographs. There could not be. We were huddled at home, waiting to figure out where our loved one had been taken in the middle of the night, most cases. This, however, is the first time that Black people can dare to look into that forbidden space of violence against us and say, I'm not going to leave you in your final moments. You're not going to die by yourself. I'm not going to let anybody make up a story about how you died. And I'm going to show the people who killed you. I'm going to show their faces, and I'll say your name so that future generations that you just weren't, a hashtag, or that you just weren't somebody in a Black snuff film, if you will. You were a person with a whole family, dreams and aspirations. And for me, as I began to just look at each successive video and know that they were all done by people of color, mostly Black people, sometimes Latino, but mainly Black people, I thought this is just paradigm shifting to me, because the cell phone is now not just a Mojo Lab kind of oddity or something that we're doing for fun. This is now being brought into court. It's evidence, and it gives some measure of closure to families that didn't have that before. When I was researching for the book, Dr. Dawn, those lynching reports, like in Atlanta Journal-Constitution and papers like that from the early 1900s, mid 1900s, they would always say this person died for reasons unknown at the hands of persons unknown. And so the family had no closure. They certainly didn't have money for an independent autopsy like we do today. And so if there was anything remaining, that's all that they got. So now these smartphone videos, even though they are traumatic to look at, they offer some measure of closure and some kind of way to, I hate to say, pre-litigate, the fact that we weren't guilty, that we didn't deserve our demise, and we shouldn't have to do that. We're the only people on the face of the earth that's asked to produce evidence to show that we didn't deserve to die. So to me, that just became such a powerful mission to let that sink in, and to see that journalism here is performing a totally different function than I initially thought it would when I went off to journalism school. It's a form of advocacy, it's a form of truth telling, and it helps get justice in many cases for families. And I see that justice is going to accelerate now, especially with this George Floyd video.
That's right. And I think back in 2016 when Alton Sterling, Alton Sterling, and then a day later, a day later, next day,
Philando Castile. Yep.
And I also, I'm going. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I
was just going to say, I dedicate the book also to his stepdaughter, Dayana Reynolds.
Yes.
Because she was in the back seat that day and should never have had to bear witness to that.
Never. And
that's your line of work too. That's why I feel like what you're doing is so important, to unpack all of that trauma for us, because there's trauma in looking. I dedicate an entire chapter in the book to the trauma of looking. And as I began to look at the stats, Dr. Dawn, I know you know them. African-American males, adolescents, suicidal ideation spiked after Mike Brown died. After Mike Brown was killed, let me say that properly. And so he was, I guess, a catalyst for many Black men or Black boys really to examine, what does my life really mean? And when I see that suicide spiked between 2014 and 2018, for me, I know that social scientists say, well, can you clearly correlate those two things? Although there's people working to link those, I didn't need all of those numbers and statistics to know that has taken a huge psychic toll on our youth. So I'm just grateful that there's people like you who are studying that, because there's so many activists I wanted to interview for the book that didn't make it in because they either took their own life, or people like Erica Garner died an untimely death. She wasn't even 30 years old, but had a heart attack just because of all the stress and trying to fight for her dad, Eric Garner, for somebody to be arrested. And as we think about people beyond the scope of cameras who are not being filmed, people like Kalief Browder, who took his life, just the trauma of bearing witness while Black, and the trauma of being expected to participate in this age-old myth of the strong Black woman, or the Black man who's impervious to pain. It's harmful on so many levels. because even though we're looking at these things, it's not like we want to. And many people don't know how to process that.
That's right. And it's interesting because it's a catch-22, because we shouldn't have to do this, but it is it's bearing witness to something that we've recorded. But at the same time, it can be traumatic for those who actually see a part of themselves on the screen and they identify with that person that has died at the hands of someone. And how do they feel about themselves? You're exactly right. And how we feed our minds are important. But we also want justice. So what do we tell our kids, right? If they're in situations where they feel that, they're getting stopped by the police, for example. And, I know that, even there are certain apps that automatically, I think TikTok has something now that you should be credited for. And, they have something that automatically, yes, we're going to talk about that a little bit later. They have something that automatically comes on off camera, that comes on and, record the engagement. Okay, come on now. We're going to talk because you have listen, this is what should be on TV all day. Positivity, Black individuals who are doing something, who are making footmarks in the sand, leaving, awesome things behind for people to follow and use. And it actually has been. I mean, if we probably wouldn't have gotten these convictions if it wasn't for you, Allissa. Okay. Because, when I think about 𝗪𝗪 Castillo and how his fiance Facebook Live, like, I'm gonna put this online, right? I mean, the idea of having something that's bearing witness to something that's happening, that needs to be credited, just like anything else, technology-wise, has been credited. And so I think that's important to acknowledge and recognize, which is why I love this book as well. But the other part that I wanted to bring to the forefront is, and why I spent a lot of time on just getting to know your journey, is because I think that our youth need to see people like you. Instead of seeing them murdered, or, just all these things, bullying, all of these things that are happening. Where's the positivity in our culture, in our society? How are we celebrated when we see these things? Not just award shows, not just for music, not just for acting. I think all of those fields are amazing, but it's people like you who are just basically setting the tone for others to follow, and how you mentioned that in your book. I mean, 15 people, right, are part of this.
15. One of them is 𝗪𝗻𝗲, right? L. Chris Stewart. I was so excited when he was the family attorney at the time for Alton Sterling and Walter Scott. And so I reached out to him on Facebook, and I told him, I think it's great what you're doing. 𝗪𝗻𝗲 trained us up well to, help people, be servant leaders. And he was like, thank you. And I really appreciate that. And I wasn't really sure what direction the dissertation was going to take. I just wanted to encourage him because I knew that he would probably be getting all kind of, trolls and things like that. I can only imagine what his inbox looked like. So when he responded, I was very happy that he did. And then a year later was when I finally had the idea for what the dissertation would look like. And that's when I noticed that he was very active on social media. He didn't necessarily need to be a commentator on CNN the way that Willie Gary or Johnny Cochran did in generations past. They were masters of working the media and getting in front of that podium with like 8 mics and saying, words that rhyme that sound good. They were just eloquent and just classy and cool, right? And so Chris was all those things with his own platform. So I thought that Attorney Stewart was doing some fabulous things in terms of what he could do within the parameters of an active case. And so I reached out again and I asked him if he'd be willing to do an interview about how he uses social media. He was like, absolutely, let's do it. So he was one of the longest interviews in the book because he was really sharing why he felt it was important to humanize not only the victim, but their families. So often we don't see them past that initial point of them maybe sobbing at a podium, talking about how upset they are that this injustice has happened. And then one of the functions of his social media journey was, how can I give just enough? What's the good, delicate balance of sharing what this family is like and who they've lost without exposing them to unnecessary harassment and things like that. So even if you look today, now that he's part of a team that is representing George Floyd's family, he has pictures in the car with Gianna, and you know that she's in good hands because, you know, he cares about people. He cares about our people. So to see little sneak peeks like that in between all the legal briefs, in between all the writing and reading and the sleepless nights, to see him sharing a fun moment with a 6-year-old who has just lost her dad is really the stuff of Black witnessing. It's what humanizes us and makes us know that these folks had families. They belonged to someone. And I think that when police look at us, they maybe don't see that. Maybe they don't know or care who we belong to, like whose we are. But I think that all the activists in the book do a fabulous job of not only highlighting the loved ones who are left behind, but highlighting the good things about their city. Like one of the other folks that was one of my favorite interviews was Devin Allen. And he's from Maryland like me. He's from Baltimore. And so when the Freddie Gray uprisings happened, I was about 30 miles away in Bowie. I moved to Bowie State University at the time, which is also HBCU. And so my students, many of them were from Baltimore. They're like, we're going back home. We're going to get these phones out and start recording. And Devin was with them. I mean, he had a nice camera out and he was just like, I'm going to take as many pictures as I can, peaceful, non-peaceful, whatever. Well, he is one of 3 amateurs, as they call them. He's not an amateur to me, but Time magazine called him one of 3 amateurs that made it on their cover. So in 2015, you have this Black man who is kind of following in the strains of Gordon Parks, you know, taking these pictures of Black life on the street, just real life, and ends up on the cover of Time, and then ends up being a Gordon Parks fellow, and then gets his 2nd Time cover this year from the George Floyd uprising photographs that he's taken. And so I drove up to Baltimore to spend a day with Devin, and he was phenomenal. Like, he told me to meet him in this store called City of Gods, which is like his favorite clothing store. And like, he's such a local hero. Like, everybody was crowded in the front area of the store, all in the door, and just listening, like hanging on to everything he said. And you can tell that he's such a leader in his community. And it's really what I wanted to highlight in the book, is that mainstream media may not know who these folks are until some big, huge precipitating event. But to Black people, we matter to each other. We know we're local celebrities to each other long before a Time magazine comes along. Like, everybody knew who he was. So that's really what I wanted to honor too, is that we are a storytelling people. And for so long, the stories that we tell have been either stolen or, you know, watered down, as told to versions, or people don't give props where they're due in terms of where things originate. So people try us on, like costumes, take a little piece of our culture there, appropriate a hairstyle, appropriate some music, and think, you know, that we're going to forget where all of that originated. So to me, Bearing Witness While Black is a lifelong project, because in many ways, I'm always going to be looking for instances where society says someone else made up this thing. And I'm always going to be like, no, actually, you know, Ida B. Wells was maybe the first woman to do that, or Devin Allen was the first person to do that. And I think we have to do that for each other in a society that tries very hard to erase us.
Amen. Amen. Or take credit for what we do and what we've been or created. You're exactly right.
Yes.
You're exactly right. And that is a part of erasing. You're exactly right. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts about the white silence phenomenon, where you have, and I'm not going to claim the person in the White House, basically not denouncing, you know, with taking with the camera video of a cell phone, you know, just yesterday, and hearing the words white power in the background. Yeah.
I saw that video and I was thinking, this is my Sunday. Oh my goodness.
Right.
And the fact that he initially said, you know, they're very fine, something equivalent to the very fine people argument that he gave in Charlottesville. It was so disturbing. Even though you deleted it, it's already out there.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of coy, playing with things and setting them there for a second and then taking them away. you've already, put the dog whistle out there to people who are willing to hear that. And I think it's incredibly divisive. And it's another reason why I feel the book was necessary, because it's coming off the heels of a historic presidential election. We had a Black president. And it was during those last couple of years, it seemed, that there was such a white lash, as Van Jones called it, against his second term, the fact that he even made a second term. And when we think about 2012 and we think about Trayvon Martin's killing and the acquittal of George Zimmerman in 2013, that was a real turning point for America, because many of the white people who voted for Barack Obama had an opportunity to say to maybe their more racist counterparts, hey, we don't want a country that's going backwards. We need to keep this forward movement going. But for whatever reason, being silent became a more comfortable option. And I think it led to where we are today. I think for many of my colleagues I've spoken to who happen to be white and voted for the current president, they're embarrassed, and a lot of them are ashamed, because they're like, I did not think that he would really be like this. I thought, he's just being a blowhard. He's a reality TV personality. I never thought that he would back his positions with policy. And I'm thinking, how can somebody who called for the death of 5 teenagers in New York not be taken seriously?
Right. Exactly.
It's very frustrating, because I'm like, it was never just rhetoric. It was always an agenda. And it's disappointing. And I think about the great Audre Lorde, one of my favorite philosophers and writers. She says, your silence will not protect you. And I think for a lot of them, they thought their silence would protect them. They're just going to quietly look over their shoulder and go ahead and place that vote and pretend to be liberal in a time where, it was really crucial to not play that game. And a lot of folks, even some of my white female colleagues, who said, well, I just didn't like Hillary and I just didn't want her. And I'm like, okay. So that whole lesser of the two evils argument as well.
It is, because I don't understand, because I've talked to some of my white female counterparts as well. And I'm trying to understand those who did vote for Trump, because we have these open discussions too. Yeah. And they also talk about how they wish they could take their vote back, that they didn't understand how he could do this. But my mom always says that if someone tells you something about them, believe them. Role doesn't, the role just heightens what they've already said they're going to do, or who they stand for, what their morals are. And what boggles my mind is how people are putting, I understand some part of it, right? But the morality is not even considered. I don't like nothing about her platform, what she does for people, how she represents, and what, nothing about the platform. So when I'm asking people about the platform, about healthcare and, schools, because, mothers care about their children.
That's right.
Funding for that, mental health advocacy. All these things. I heard the same thing. Well,
that's
I just
the same
don't
thing I was hearing.
And I'm like, but you have another man who actually told you about who he is, showed you his morals, even against people like you, white women. And I'm just trying to understand that. And I know I don't have a white woman right now who's voted for Trump on the show. I plan to, because I think that this is something that definitely needs to be talked about and really explored, because other white women need to see themselves in her and start to understand that it's not about liking. It's about how this person is going to be an advocate of equity, equality, all these things, the women's movement, all these things for our country. That's what it's about, and
absolutely,
it just boggles my mind. Yes, so sorry.
It's weird when you look at those stats too, because they were responsible for shifting the vote in that direction. Even though he didn't win the popular vote, he won enough of it because nearly half of them did vote for him. So I think that when we think about going into the booth this time, we really have to be careful about not getting too comfortable, thinking that, because I know a lot of my relatives are to blame, because they're thinking, oh, he's never going to win. He's so outrageous. Everyone knows that, he's racist, and that's a lot of things that he says or have done in the past that are bubbling up, like that leaked, footage of him saying, grab him by the, After all that came out, so many elders in my family were like, I don't need to go to the polls because this dude is a joke. And they just thought that, you know, kind of took for granted, about 3 or 4. And we still, like, we get on them all the time. Like, you should have gone. Even if you think that we had it in the bag, so to speak, you should have gone. And so, you know, it was a couple of my elders, my older aunties and stuff, who basically said, you know, I just didn't show up. I know that that's not wholesale what happened, though. 94% of the Black community did come out and vote. But for those who were on the fence, on either end of the stratum, because I interviewed some of my college students who it was their first time to vote. They were 18 and they didn't go. And I was at Bowie State at the time, and it's a Black school. And I said, you guys, you know, I don't see your little stamp, you know, your little sticker you get. And they were like, what's the point? And they're like, I don't like either one of them. And so that was tough too, to hear that, especially for a lot of my young Black men. They were like, well, you know, Hillary was responsible, or at least her husband was responsible for the 3 strikes you're out kind of legislature that, you know, swept up so many of our relatives. And the fact that she kind of coined and bandied about this term super predator bothers me. And so I couldn't, you know, just show up. I just didn't. And so we know that's a very slim margin of, you know, statistically, of the Black electorate that didn't come out. But I do acknowledge that those were concerns, and that those small margins of the older people who thought we had it in the bag and the younger people who were like, I just don't like anybody, they need to come out this time so that we can not have just 94, but like 99.999% of all Black folk, no matter how long it takes to wait in that line. Bring your lawn chair, bring your thermos, your backpack, whatever you have to bring, your mask, and be prepared, because they're playing games with, you know, if you look in Louisville, I mean, a town of 600,000, almost 80% Black, I believe it is. And they narrowed it down to 1 polling place for the primaries, because we allowed them to kind of just strip away the Civil Rights, you know, Voting Act that we had in place. You know, these kind of things are real policy. They're not just somebody speaking in terms of, you know, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. These aren't just little cute phrases. These are real ideologies that people have, that they're trying to figure out how to dismantle systems that we've had in place for so long, that at least empower us to get rid of folks if we don't think they're doing a good job. Right. So I'm concerned about that part of bearing witness while Black, because this next frontier is going to be, now that we've spied our cameras on people and we know exactly what you're doing, we then need to probe and put that, you know, gaze on the legislature. What are these leaders doing while we're arguing about other things? You know, while we're frustrated about COVID-19 and trying to figure out how to stay alive, they're steady passing laws and passing new legislature every day. 900 pages nobody will read ever. And then all of a sudden you wonder why your life is different, or how, you know, voting got to be this way. So I just, as a journalist, I'm very conscious of, you know, distractions. But I'm also, I understand why people are risking their lives right now to go out and protest for a month now. Because just having that knee on somebody's neck that way, having the arrogance to look into the camera because you know nothing is going to happen to you, cannot happen again. Cannot.
Exactly. Where do you see bear witnessing while Black? Like, where do you see the Mojo Lab being used? How do you see it in future? Not just to, I mean, we shouldn't have to.
Yeah,
but
I know.
Thank God for it, right? Because I think about Breonna Taylor, and if someone, I think about her. I think about Trayvon Martin. I mean, if these individuals had some type of evidence that just explicitly shows how they were murdered, you know what I mean? How do you see going forward?
Yeah, I think we should go back to that point. You're making a really good point. It's that it's not so much that if we don't have video, we don't have the groundswell, right? We think about Trayvon Martin. There was no video of that. There's no video of Mike Brown in the moment of him being killed, just a post-mortem picture of him. And so if we think about national outcry, we have to be just as vocal with women victims as we are about the men, because we've seen throughout time, we can be galvanized through Trayvon, through Mike, without video. What we're really looking at, though, is something that Dr. 𝗪𝗂𝗪𝗏 talks about a lot, and that's intersectionality. When we think about the intersection of my Blackness plus my femaleness, it automatically cancels out a sympathetic gaze many times. People, for example, when they looked at Sandra Bland's video, were like, well, what did she do wrong? Was she sassy? All of that language, all those stereotypes that were conjured up, just harken back to old stereotypes that people have about Black women. And the fact that we have never really been able to be protected is something that just really sticks with me and sits with me when I see that her name is not trending. So it's not that nobody filmed it, because we don't need film for the men to be, you know, up in arms. But we have to be just as up in arms with the women too. And I think about people like our own Xavier Wright. We have to say her name. Yes. Tatiana Jefferson went to our school.
Amen. Yeah.
And when I think about her and, you know, being with her family member, playing video games, trying to protect herself, because again, there's nobody there to protect us. She's trying to protect herself. Yes. And look out that window and figure out what was happening. And just to be shot without warning, it was chilling to me. I'm thinking, you can be in your own house and this happened. And if we roll back, if we think about Breonna Taylor, someone was trying to protect her. You know, so it's like, it's not that brothers don't want to protect us. Even when they try to, they can be put in harm's way. So, you know, Black men, I mean, her significant other went downstairs and told her to wait in the room to make sure that she was safe. And when they came barging in with guns, you know, he couldn't protect her. So again, it's like, it's this thing of where does a Black woman fall on this totem pole in terms of care? Because what I see right now is Black women are at the forefront of this movement. Yes. 3 Black women founded the Black Lives Matter movement. And we've always been there, whether it's been Diane Nash right alongside John Lewis running SNCC, whether it's been Ella Baker with that megaphone, whether it's been, you know, I'm sick and tired, sick and tired. I mean, it's always been us organizing, making flyers, writing speeches, proofreading, you know, or just getting it together. But for the first time, but for the first time, you can see us. Because of social media, we're not stuck behind a charismatic Black male. We're out front. And that means that we need even more protection, though, because all the activists that I interviewed in the book, all the women at least, were like, I get doxxed. I get people putting my address online. I get people following me around, trying to take pictures of me. I don't know who they are, with like a long range lens. They just told me all kind of things that just will chill you. And they said, but you know what? That's how we know we're being successful. And that's how we know this movement is working. And I'm just looking like, what? I mean, so many times that I would just sit there without a second follow-up question, because I'm just taking in how brave you have to be to deal with that. One of the other women activists I interviewed, Marissa Johnson, she interrupted Bernie Sanders. She's the one who interrupted him with her purple braids and was like, look. And ended his campaign, right? So she talked to me for a long time. And do you know, she told me that made it into the book. She was saying as she left, she had to surround, as she left the platform that day, she had to surround herself with white allies because the crowd was trying to bite her, like viciously bite her. One of her friends was bitten. And this is supposed to be, we think West Coast, you think very liberal. And she said, you know, it was just vehement. And all I did was ask for 4 minutes of silence to acknowledge the 4 hours that Mike Brown lay in the street. 4 hours. I'm inconveniencing you for 4 minutes. And he lay there for 4 hours. And you want to bite my friends. And so when she told me stories like that, I was just like, you really have to be courageous to bear witness while Black, because it's not a safe thing to do, especially if you're a woman. But I'm so heartened to see most of the women in this book are still working within the movement, even if it's in a different way. Yeah. So for her example, she went back to school, she's teaching. Another activist went back to be a nurse because she spent most of her time on the front lines in Ferguson, getting tear gas out of people's faces and caring for the injured. And she decided to go back and be a nurse. So she is an RN now. There's other women like Brittany Packnett Cunningham, who have become their own tour de force. Like Brittany Packnett, she does not need, anybody to create a space for her, right?
Exactly.
She's got her own podcast. She can drop in on MSNBC if she wants to. She was invited to Harvard to be a fellow. I mean, it's just endless possibility. She's like sponsorship with Pantene. So, I mean, just amazing work that women have been doing in these spaces. And that just harkens back to the original point that you had, that people have not always seen the contributions that Black women have made to these social justice movements, but we still need protection. And that whole myth, which I'm sure you see a lot in your work, therapy of Black women being stronger or being impervious to pain, is a lie. It's a lie. We hurt, we cry, we need a hug, we need support. And this movement is really drawing attention to all of those things to help humanize us as not just these stoic, stylish creatures rather, but people who are really fighting for something that we shouldn't have to fight for anymore.
Yes. Allissa, and thank you so much for spending this time with me. I really appreciate it. I want to ask you a few other final questions. Can you tell us, and I know this is a hard question to ask about something that is of yours, but what would be the home point that you would like for people to know about your book, Bearing Witness While Black?
Oh, it's a good question, Dr. Dawn. I would say the main point of the book is to never stop looking. I think many times our instinct, human nature, is to look away from things that make you uncomfortable. When you're a little kid, you're taught, when your mom is fussing you out, you don't look her in the eye with a bunch of attitude. You better look down. You better look somewhere else. Right. Who are you looking at like that? Like, that is a common refrain in the African American home. Who are you looking at like that? And so I think looking for Black people has always been so loaded in that way. We've always been trained to look away because we were scared we would get hurt ourselves. But now we see that looking away has gotten us nowhere. And now we're ready to confront, with the evidence that we've tried to put together, some kind of history, that ties together all these atrocities. And I think that's what's the most beautiful thing about what we're creating right now. Even though it's painful to watch, we're linking these things to Emmett Till. We're linking these things to the 4,000 people that Ida B. Wells documented in her Red Record. They're all part of this really grotesque club that nobody wants to be part of. But for so long, we've had to look away from it. We only recently just got a lynching museum to commemorate. There's a long running list of people who have lost their lives at the hands of police that's memorialized nowhere. So again, for me, as a journalist and as a storyteller, it's always about remembering them, remembering the people. Memory is so important for African Americans. And our ancestors believed that, griots were trained to carry the heritage and the story to the next generation. And when they died, it's like people used to say, when a griot dies, it's like a library burns to the ground, because they were supposed to train that next person. And so we've always been trained in that. Black people know how to tell a good story, and we know how to keep our heritage alive. But when it's cut short due to these acts of violence, I worry that so much of our heritage is going to be lost. Gianna Floyd doesn't have her dad right now. First Father's Day without him. Deanna Reynolds doesn't have her dad. Diamond Reynolds doesn't have her Philando. Alton Sterling was a father. You know what I mean? There were so many different lines and generations that are cut short because somebody just decided that was okay to do. There's also the generations that never were. What would have Tatiana Jefferson done? Maybe she would decide to get married, have kids, maybe they would have been savior rights. Maybe they would have moved, even further than she. But when you cut a line, when you cut a generation prematurely, it just does so much damage that I don't think people of other races quite understand that our legacies they're kind of broken on both ends. We don't quite know where we started. We don't know what part of Africa we're from. We kind of swab and guess. And then you have this other end of the branch, the other end of the family tree that has these little hacked branches off of it where people decided they were going to do violent things. So by looking And by still infusing our stories and still keeping alive those stories, even though they're not here with us in the present, we can honor their memories. And so I encourage people to take oral histories of your families. You don't have to be a journalist or a professor. You can sit with your grandma, sit with your mom and dad, record them, especially if they're elderly. They're getting up there, 80, 90 years old, record them. Because you're going to forget what their voice sounds like after they pass away. You're going to forget maybe their little gestures, how they move. Record them. Use that device in your pocket to make sure that your family history will never be lost. And if I can impart anything, bearing witness while Black is a lifelong endeavor that all of us should try to aspire to. All of us have incredible things that we're working on and things that we're doing, but it means nothing if we can't pass that on to this next generation to learn from.
Well said. I'm such a fan. Well said, Allissa.
Oh,
oh my goodness. I am. Where can people go to purchase your book and support you, especially the 𝗧𝗵𝗲rites that are out there? We need to make sure this book is sold out everywhere. So where can we go?
Yes, it's the second time it's sold out. You guys have been so great. I looked on Amazon twice. And I was like, it's sold out again.
Sold out.
Big ugly crying that day. But it was sold out twice. This is the third print run. I'm really excited. But you can go on Amazon. It takes a little bit longer because they're prioritizing the medical supplies. So my 𝗧𝗵𝗲rites on the front lines, I understand. I'm behind the PPE, and that's fine. So it'll take like 4 to 5 days on Amazon. But if you go straight to the Oxford website, it'll come to you within 2 to 3 days. And thank you to all your lovely sorors too. I had so many who reached out and said, can I get an autographed copy? So shout out to Dina and Alejandro. I really appreciate you guys.
We love you. What's next for you, Dr. Allissa? I know. What's next? What are you doing now? What's next?
Right now, I'm getting ready to do another fellowship. It'll be announced this summer. It's at an Ivy. But I'm going to take some time off. I have a sabbatical. I'm just going to take the year off, really process and absorb what happened this spring with George Floyd, with COVID on top of, and write that next book and really take some space, that mental self-care space, to step away from all the coverage, because it hurts you for a time if you stay in it. So I applied for a sabbatical and got it, and I'll be working on the next volume.
Awesome. Dr. Allissa Richardson, award-winning. I mean, all these accomplishments, but you're just a humble, bright, intelligent, beautiful, just being. And it's been an honor. It really has been an honor to allowing me to have this time with you this evening. Thank you so much for allowing me to do that.
I see the comments down here. Thank you, Brandy. Yeah. She's my classmate. So too,
right there. Yes, Shakita. Yes, a lot of love. And this, you all, please. Yeah, share this, you all. Share this with everyone you know, okay? Because I know that a lot of people will be looking at this on the replay. I'm actually airing 4 platforms right now. So I want everybody to see you and get to know you and support you and all the work that you're doing, but also be inspired. You know, I want people to be inspired when they hear your story and they see you. And of course, the accomplishments are wonderful, but they also see your heart. They see the journey. They see themselves in you. And it actually gives them hope that they can also accomplish whatever's predestined for them. So thank you so much for saying yes to yourself. I love to hear that you are doing sabbatical. That's great. We're going to talk a little bit later to make sure that you get your credit. I would definitely want to follow up on that as well, and maybe we can talk about people that can assist you in that era, because this is a huge footprint that you've left. Thank
you so much.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Dawn, for giving women a platform. So proud of you. You've been amazing since 𝗧𝗵𝗲. I am not the least surprised that you have this kind of platform where you're elevating others. I always remember, even though we didn't hang out a ton, you have this big, huge, bright smile crossing that yard. And I just always admired and looked up to you. You know, you're a year ahead of us. So thank you for creating this kind of space that Black women academics can talk about their work.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you, Allissa. Thank you so much. Thank you. And to everyone that's out there, please share this again with everyone you know. We want to make sure that this gets to the millions of children's ears that are just wanting to have hope. And maybe many of them don't have the hope that they should have within their homes, within their schools, within their community. You know, people like Dr. Allissa Richardson is definitely a story of hope. And she's actually been awarded for those things, as she should. But she's also made marks in our community and in our culture, especially in our history. So Dr. Allissa, thanks again for sharing with us. And everyone, thank you again for another broadcast, joining another broadcast of Live with Dr. Dawn. Appreciate you all. Have a wonderful evening. Take care. Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Dr. Celeste, your board-certified family medicine physician specializing in urgent care. We are doing drive-through rapid antibody testing for COVID-19 with follow-up PCR testing when needed. We're doing this at the office of Dr. 𝗪𝗂𝗪𝗏 Skin Wellness Centers of Alabama, 1920 Huntington Road, 35209. We're doing this Monday, Thursdays, and Fridays from 8 until 12. It's $125 for the assessment as well as the test with Dr. Celeste. Contact us for an appointment at drcelestec19.com. Thank you.